Welcome to Present Poetry, a podcast where we sit back, relax, and enjoy some poets of the past and present. I'm your host, Erin Crittenden, and before we get started on this week's episode, I want to remind you that all of the material used in this podcast is either public domain or used with permission from the author or the author's estate. It's a fun time for all ages, so sit back, relax, and get ready to hear this week's featured poet. This week's featured poet is Richard Stimac. Richard Stimac has published a poetry book titled Bricolage through Spartan Press, 2 poetry chapbooks, and 1 flash fiction chapbook. In his work, Richard explores time and memory through the landscape and humanscape of the St. Louis region. He invites you to follow his poetry Facebook page titled Richard Stimac Poet, which will be linked in the description below. We are reading a few of his poems that he submitted to us through the form at presentpoetry.com. This poem is called Recipe. When I knead self-rising bread bleached so bone white, it pales my hands as if I've dug in pyre ash for relics of a saint. I remember my grandma when she smoothed a bed sheet atop the kitchen table, then sprinkled flour across the threads to keep the dough from sticking as she rolled it sheer as parchment, beneath the weight of the tapered pin my grandpa hand-laid for her. I stood beside her. She would pause, smile, place her hands on my face. The dough smoothed from edge to edge, she cut it into wide strips that looked like scrolls, then rolled them in upon themselves. She held the kitchen knife with the handle smooth and shined with years of sweat, and slid the blade through the folds. With each slice, thin ribbons, long as tendons, tanned as sutures, to bind a sheaf of folio or a condemned man's wrists, fell across her fingers, dusted as they were with her work. Her winter pride was a watery broth glazed with chicken grease, a few slivers of carrots so overcooked they dissolved in the spoon, and the noodles, slight in texture, no body to test against the tooth, along with black pepper shaken through the plastic grate of a handheld tin. She set a cup of soup before me when I sat at her kitchen table and said, "Take this and eat. It's all I have to give. I'll be dead soon." She slurped when she ate and wiped her mouth on her housecoat sleeve. Only years later, when I had learned to read and write and speak well, did I understand that memory lives in the mouth as taste, not words. Histories were written on those sheaves of dough, genealogies, traditions, yarns spun from the American Midwest down the Mississippi to New Orleans, to Trieste, to the bottom land of the Danube, then where? East, south, to the wheat fields between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Horn of Africa? Each mouthful gave me a savor of the past. This poem is called Down River. When Fred Hampton went south, did he follow Illinois Route 3? First past Alton, where Lincoln begged the question of slavery? And Lovejoy lay in an unmarked grave, past the rotted stockade of Lewis and Clark, the marker for the 1814 Hartford Massacre, past East St. Louis and its riotous blues, the broken Inca of the Gateway Arch, the abandoned mounds of Cahokia, past Kaskaskia and Fort de Chartres, where the French hugged the river, just as the great river road does today, past all the past until he stopped at Menard, with its brown limestone below the bluffs, above the thick soil of the Black Bottom? He never reached deep into Little Egypt, not to Cairo, nor the temples of Memphis, where the Cherokees cross to the other side, where the Ohio widens the Mississippi, where Jim missed his turn in the dark mist of night. Neither man made it to the promised land. This poem is called Retaining Walls. Along the far edge of the parking lot, the landlord's men stacked rough-hewn stone to build a retaining wall for the runoff rain. Before the backhoe gouged the ground and broke the asphalt's lip, a picket fence of sorts stood sentry around the dumpster and cars, the kind of fence I could imagine settlers built to keep their culture in as much as keep the unconquered wilderness out, they'd thought. Like all intended boundaries, the fence fell into disrepair. Spring rain, winter freeze did their harm of rusted nails, rotted wood. Along the cornerstone, a divide opened, a makeshift gate that allowed a bypass from the potholed drive on the outer side. A neighbor boy would pedal his bike through, then abandon it next to the back steps. To my amazement, it was never stolen. His mom shortcut her way from car to door with full grocery bags and calls to him to hurry and help her up the rear hall. Even I once pushed through the split balusters, but tripped and caught my hand on splintered wood. I learned not to stray from the ordained path. The workmen blocked my spot with cut and fill, and kept the clay dirt and severed tree roots within the yellow lines. The work was right, I had to admit. A new wall was needed. Bounds must be set. What is in, what is out. Old ways are abandoned. They always are. With all the talk of more walls in the news, it was foreseeable for me to think of tearing down old walls, building new ones. There is something about walls that comforts me, like a father who defines family rules, or common sense, or just the way things are. I observed the man crenellate the cope and implant PVC pipe for weep holes, and lay dead men at right angles as anchors. And I thought of letters and words and lines, the comfort that comes with structure and form. Even chaos relies on definition. There's an allure to chaos, isn't there? Temptation that without God one can will anything. We all like that sort of lie. The building manager has apologized to me. The retaining wall took too long. The men should have finished by now, but haven't. And I'm okay with that. Not all our walls are meant to last. Maybe none of them are. Yet, there is something about walls I love. This poem is called Names. When I push a sprout into the earth, or mound soil atop a handful of seed, I memorize the plot I've laid out, though I know, in the end, I'll forget. So in the shed, I notate each square, the what, the when, the where, the how, as if I were inscribing a creation myth for some future fool to read and cherish. That was my first mistake. I draw blank on the meaning of my own words, and interpret, as if it were arcane, my own writing. So much for scripture. With black marker and paper cards, I staked the things in the garden. A graveyard of popsicle sticks defined the furrow and mounds. The first rain washed my handiwork away. That was my second mistake, to believe writing prevented oblivion. In any form, words become visions we see but cannot touch. I gave up my ghost, and the garden grew how it willed, contrary and nonconforming. Orange squash bloomed, tomato vines climbed, carrot stems frizzed, onion stalks waved, like congregants beset by the Spirit. I knew what I'd sown only when I reaped. Consequences reveal the cause. Endings explicate beginnings. I put those ideas to rest. The squirrels left tomatoes half-eaten. The pinky-sized carrots went to seed. I stuffed the squash blossoms with cream cheese and already plot next spring's plantings. This poem is called Memory of America. My father's body is the memory of America. Thin limbs, swollen belly, weak and resigned, stored in an institution away from public sight. My father's body is unexploded munitions buried in a farmer's field. One day a plow, a tire, a foot will find it. We will not hear of that. My father's body is an artifact. Only academics and clinicians probe for secrets. They will publish their findings. My father's body is a documentary in many parts, shown consecutively. Critics and viewers alike praise it. My father's body is a family photo album. There he is, shirtless, in a bunker near Saigon. Here my mother with me in Illinois. My father's body is a relic I contemplate. He feels himself barely more than an object. My father's body is the memory of America. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Present Poetry Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to like us, leave a review, or share us on social media. If you are a poet or you know someone who is, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us or submit your work through our website, which is www.present-poetry.com. Again, that is www.present-poetry.com. We can't wait to hear from you.